That's
but
fine.
not me. But whatever. We didn't say anything weird. All right,
That's very funny.
we're going. We're doing it live today.
Yeah.
So why
Fuck
don't
it.
you
We're
introduce
we're
yourself?
doing it live.
Yeah. So you're live
Yeah,
on the
so
screen now, and I have the funding and everything up.
all right, fantastic. So my name is Nico MacDougall. I live in Washington D.C. in the United States. I'm a game designer, game editor. I also this past year was the coordinator for the second year of the awards, which is
Oh, I didn't
a
know
very
that.
SEO friendly, a very SEO friendly awards show for indie TTRPGs. Um, Keep an eye out for that coming back in a few months. But today we're here to talk about my Crowdfundr campaign for the Hauntings of a Hyde Park, which is a zine supplement, unofficial zine supplement for The Between by Jason Cordova, published by Gauntlet Publishing.
Cool. So I have it on the screen here. You can't see that unless you're looking at the stream separately. But so
Yeah,
why
no,
don't
I'm
you
not
tell
looking at the stream
tell us
separately.
a little more about it and what just sort of walk me through where this comes from.
Yeah, so I've really been getting into the whole sort of Card from Brindlewood family of games over the past year and a half, probably. Brindlewood Bay, the cozy murder mystery game, between Victorian monster hunting. I've played some of the Silt Verses, which is like their most recent one, based on
I haven't heard about
the
that
the
one yet.
podcast, the audio. It's based on the podcast audio drama of the same name. It's like folk horror, folk divinity. Um, it's the same basic sort of like structure, mechanics stuff, but just a
Hmm.
different sort of world and working with the people, the good people at Rusty Quill. Pretty sure that's who's yeah. But yeah, but so this project just kind of came out of like initially I was just like, oh, I just wanted to kind of put together a playbook, like a PC option for the between, and then it just sort of, as so often happens, kind of spiraled out into like oh, but like maybe I can do a mastermind. There's not that many masterminds out there. Then I was like, oh, but like I want to do these threats that are associated with the mastermind. It just kind of kept like sort
Right.
of kept going until I was eventually like, I have like a full zine project. I have a full zine's worth of stuff here. I should just like I was like I did my first zine month project last year with a solo journaling game called The River Spirit, and this is actually in many ways returning to a lot of the similar sort of, at least uh artistic motifs, because there's a lot of water and river gods and stuff like that in the Hauntings of Hyde Park, actually.
Cool. So what do we get? What do we? I'm looking at the thing here. What do we get if we get this? We get a playbook. We get a mastermind. We get 3 threats and 4 unseens. Is that I don't
Yes.
know that term.
Yeah, unseen is a thing that's not only is it kind of specific to like Card from Brindlewood, it's actually even like specific to like the Between.
Okay.
Um and
I'm not super familiar
it's
with the between.
yeah. So yeah, and so if people aren't, they wouldn't be really familiar with this. The unseen, it can be a little bit of a weird concept because it's a little sort of like narrative vignette, and it happens during the night phase of the game, and the game is divided into like these separate phases. And so the night phase, your monster hunters are like they've put together this plan. They're going to like sort of high action scenes. They go and like do much more sort of dangerous stuff. They often like are taking on supernatural threats directly. And then in between each of those scenes, you intersperse these little story beats from the unseen. It's this like thing that happens completely out of the story. It's like taking place somewhere else in London or
Okay.
even other places, depending on like what you're doing. And it's just sort of like it's giving this like color and character to the world outside of like the hunters and your players and like their characters and like the immediate stuff of the story. It's
So
like, but like let's see what's going
are
on
they
somewhere else.
are they tied into the events of the story, or are they completely unrelated?
They're they're completely unrelated, by and large. Nothing's stopping you, I guess, from choosing some kind of like an unseen that
Okay.
does relate to like what's going on in the story, but they're pretty much intended to kind of be separate. But there is uh one of the ways you get XP in this game, like in a lot of like Powered by the Apocalypse games, is you have these like you answer some questions at the end of each session, like, oh, like, did we solve a problem, like, did we
Right.
address a threat or whatever. And one of those is called, did you experience an echo in the night, and that refers to like, did you see some kind of thematic through line like in your sort of main story that resonated with the unseen that was chosen, so like one of my unseens in this zine is called it's called The Nightman Cometh, and it's about like the sewer, the workers, they're called nightmen, who would come out into the streets of London at night and like empty out the cesspits. So what everything, this like what all the human waste and like like chamber pods
Right.
essentially was sort of like dumped into. And so like it's sort of like they're like looking at them and their jobs and sort of like what they're thinking about. And so like maybe during the so like an echo in the night could be like you're playing something out and a character like falls into a cesspit, or like you encounter some other night worker who's like typically not sort of seen and not very common,
Mhm.
or even something like there's a part of it where like two of the workers are like talking with each other and just talking about something, and maybe during the scene there's like a similar conversation that happens. It's very open-ended in the game, but like it's like the unseens are kind of there to like, they give this extra color and like flavor and like character to the world, but it's also an opportunity for you to be like, oh, like we can work that stuff in thematically if we want to sort
Right.
of
Right.
like help advance ourselves a little bit.
Cool. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's a really interesting part of the Between, and it's honestly a really fun thing. It was a really fun thing to write. Like that was some of the most fun that I had in this project. Not
Yeah,
that the rest
because
of it
you
wasn't
don't have
fun.
to you don't have to worry so much the pressure of a lot of adventure design. What's the word I want here? Common wisdom is to make sure that the things that you're putting in the book are focused on
Hmm.
the adventure. And so to have a space that is just like, hey, you don't actually have to worry about tying this in as a creator is really freeing. I did a
Oh
big
yeah.
ass setting book, and so there was a lot of space in there. If you're doing a setting book, there's lots of
Hmm.
room where you can just be like, here's a thing that isn't really related to anything, but it's here.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's like, and you don't have to worry. You kind of don't worry about it. Like it's it's not that it doesn't have to make sense, but like you don't have to worry about it making sense with everything else that you've written,
Right.
right? It's like you don't have to worry about like, oh, but like would that happen in this place, or like would that it's like it doesn't have to matter. These scenes could happen in like the edge of London, or they could happen like in the Tower of London, or it could happen like in a rich person's mansion or whatever. You don't have to be anywhere near those things. Like, so it really does free up everything to just be kind of like, well, let's see what's going on in a part of London we've never been to, or like with a kind of person we've never like seen before or whatever.
So is this all? How did you? It says you did the art. How did you do it? What's going on with this? Is it all mostly like
Uh
public domain photo manip stuff?
Yeah, well, yeah. So the cover art will not be me. The cover art
Okay.
is going to be an artist that I actually met over Thanksgiving when I was back home in California visiting my family for Thanksgiving. But the other art is going to be, yeah, mostly sort of like photo manip stuff from a large part of it is going to be the work from this guy Gustave Doré, who is this like French illustrator in the Victorian times, and he had this book called London: A Pilgrimage, where he like went to London and just like did a bunch of illustrations of like what he saw there. It's like kind of a travel log, but it's also very like it's very sort of like it's a very kind of harsh look at like what life in London was like for a lot of people. You know, like a lot of the images are sort of like people really crowded together, and it's like it doesn't look miserable, but it's very sort of it's not romantic at all.
Right.
You know, it's not like ooh, London is this incredible city. It's like no, London's kind of like dark and it's kind of cramped and it's kind of dirty and the industrialization has really sort of like crushed a lot of people, you know. And so looking at stuff like that as well as other like sort of like you know political art, I mean not political art, but like you know sort of like newspaper periodical cartoons at the
Right.
same time, like a lot of those illustrations are gonna fit in well there. And I think I want to kind of like do some additional stuff in you know like in Affinity to sort of like add some color to some of those to make them pop out. You know, like maybe like a face in the crowd is like looks weird or something like that
Mhm.
because it's like I want it to look like a hag or I want it to look like a ghost or something,
Right.
you know. So the interior art is gonna be relatively sparse, but it's mostly gonna be that kind of public domain stuff sort of like put into there. And I want to make the layouts, and this is none of it is laid out yet. I've basically finished the writing for the base sort of stuff, but the layout I also want to look like sort of, you know, like a periodical of the time, you know, sort of maybe like a slightly textured color for the
Mhm.
pages and like to sort of divide it into columns and then have these like images sort of like both put in there like a periodical, like a newspaper, but also kind of spilling off the page a little bit to sort of make it seem like they're sort of I don't know even invading that space. But yeah, so that's the art sort of direction more is like is kind of what I'm envisioning is like the interior stuff.
Cool. That sounds awesome. I'm
Yeah.
working on something right now where the whole layout is based on like 90s Sears Whoosh book catalogs.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's always great to
So
have that kind of like real reference material,
yes.
right? Where you're like I don't have to figure this out. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm just looking at something that I find interesting
Yeah.
and kind of like working from there.
Yeah, I was saying in an unrelated Reddit post today, the um page layout has been a thing for over 200 years in our
Right,
society. There is
exactly.
so much to learn about it and also so much to pull from and figure out how to do stuff. So you're never really starting from scratch.
Right, absolutely.
So when did you launch this? Today? Yesterday?
I launched this yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, I decided to launch it on January 31st.
278. We're at 23%. You need 1.2. That's doing pretty all right. That's a good clip, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm happy with where it's at. I've
Especially
definitely
for
had
especially for like Crowdfundr is not Kickstarter and it's not BackerKit, so it's not the top two places.
right, yeah. Oh, I'm yeah, well aware of that. But yeah, I had a good time on Crowdfunder last year
Refreshes.
when I did my first Zine month project. And so I sort of like I was like coming back to because I'm like, you know what? Most of my energy right now is going into sort of like writing this thing. So I kind of
Mhm.
want to use something that I don't need to like figure out, you know. I'm like I know how to do it already. I don't know how different like, you know,
Right.
Kickstarter or BackerKit would be, but I'm just like I just don't want that extra stress.
Mhm.
like
Yeah. Yeah. How long were you working on the writing for this?
it's a good question. It's hard to say. A lot of the sort of like concerted work has really been in the last like 2 months.
Okay.
Um, but
But you had bits
the
and
so
pieces kind of floating around in the ether before then. That's
yeah,
how a lot of my
yeah. So
stuff works
like
too.
yeah, absolutely. The playbook. So the playbook in this, the dispossessed, which is sort of like the idea is like you're an alien who has somehow found themselves stranded on Earth. And so it's kind of just like you have to kind of decide like, oh, I'm gonna try to like fix up my spaceship and like leave. Am I fine to stay here? That one has probably been like I probably started work on that like maybe like a good 4 to 6 months ago. That's definitely been sort of more complete for longer. That was like the first thing I kind of finished in this project. And then I had these like other ideas sort of floating around, just like you were saying, it's like bits and pieces. And then about 2 months ago, I was like, okay, I want to be releasing like sort of previews of this leading up to. I've been
Mhm.
releasing each component, like each part of this. I've basically released like every 2 weeks or so over the last, I guess it'd be like 2.5 months or maybe
Yeah.
like leading up to the project launching. So I was like, okay, like I really need to I want to set this schedule for myself. Like I want to be able to sort of like release this so that people can see it and get interested in it, get excited about it, and also have confidence that like this is a product that, exists, that like this is not me just being like, well, I'll think about it and like I'll maybe consider doing it. It's like, no, it's real. The writing is
Right.
done.
Right.
If you back it, that just means then I'll send it to the editor and I'll get the cover art from the artist and I'll figure out the layout and like it's a done deal, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so like the sort of knuckling down and like going from like, oh, cool ideas to like what's the actual writing has definitely happened in like the last 2.5 months.
Cool. Cool. So let's see. You have a digital hardship tier for $3.
Mm-hmm.
You got 8. That's your normal digital copy. 15 physical, and then for $30 you can donate a physical copy. And everybody who's entered in correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody who's in the hardship tier or the digital tier is entered into a raffle to win a physical copy.
Yes, yeah. So that's something that I'm actually really excited about. It's an experiment that I'm doing. I figure,
Stand
it's
by.
like I have this like the digital stuff. I'm very happy to just sort of provide a bunch of community copies for that, like once it sort of gets funded and laid out, et cetera, et cetera. But like it's the physical copies that I really am interested in trying to get like, in more people's hands if they want it, but maybe it's really hard. Maybe they can't afford it or whatever. And so I was kind of thinking like,
Come on.
okay, well, like if, especially in sort of the spirit of Zine Month,
Yeah.
and like if other people, oh my gosh, you can barely see
Yes.
that
Yes.
cat.
She is. She is. She is the night huntress. Oh, she Angie. I picked her.
Oh
I was
no.
making sure she didn't
Um.
pee in my hamper.
Oh, of course, that's very important. But yeah, like the idea of like, oh well, like I would love to try to get more physical copies into people's hands if they want it, but maybe can't afford it. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I'll put these higher tiers because I don't have I don't necessarily begrudge people for doing it, but like I'm personally not like a big fan of well, no one's a fan of scope creep, right? But like I'm not
Right.
a fan of like offering all those like physical add-ons. I don't really have the resources to do that. I don't have like the contacts to do it, even if I did want to. But so I was like, okay, like let me put in some larger tier, higher tier options if their people are feeling generous, and that way they
And
can
that
like
offsets the community rather
exactly.
than somebody paying a bunch of money for so that they get a bunch of stuff, some of which they might not even want, but they just want to give you more money. Because I've done that before. I have funded at
Hmm.
high level tiers, and then I get this box of crap that I don't want,
Right.
and now
And
I'm
it's
like, what
like
do I do with this?
right, it's like this stuff is cool, but I don't really like need it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to have, I guess, but like ultimately if you're more interested in just like supporting ultimately if you're just
Right. The
more
only
interested
reason
in
I
like
did this is because
supporting
I
the
wanted to give the person a bunch of money.
right. And so yeah, so basically my feeling is like, okay, so like it's like like having the lower digital tiers like can also help this get funded, right? It's like if people can
Yeah,
like can
that's free money
that's
basically.
it's money. And the higher tiers will also help it get funded and it could also get hard copies to other people. I'm it's it's like and it's also like this is a thing that I'm willing to accept could theoretically blow up in my face because I was like looking at shipping prices and stuff for like basically anywhere outside of the US and I was
Yeah, that
like
can be a bitch.
I was like
I had a guy in Australia who was like, you want to you're charging me I was charging him $20 cuz that's what it cost for me to send
right,
a zine to Australia.
yeah, that's
And
just the facts.
yeah, I was like I literally like sent the guy a screenshot of his address in my in pirate ship, and I'm like, this is the cheapest option I got. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so, it's entirely possible that like if someone like, gets the digital only, wins the raffle, if they live in Australia or like
Then
the
that's
UK or
$20 out of your
Germany or
pocket that you're just
something.
doing.
Yeah, it's like it's potentially a lot of money for me, but like that's like not like not like "Ugh, I'm not doing this for the money, but like this is not my job, you know,
Right.
like this is like
Yeah.
a thing for fun. I would like to be compensated for the work that I'm doing, but also like if I, you know, not my
If you end
editor,
up
not my
eating it,
artist,
it's not gonna hurt you.
exactly. As long as I'm not like losing money on the whole thing, which I don't even know how that could really happen. Like
It can
because
happen. I've almost done it.
well, true, true. I'm just saying in this case, I'm like, it would have to be so many people backing it digital that like all happen to win it on Australia or something,
Yeah.
which yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely could happen. And if that's an experiment that goes badly, then like, well, that's what the experiments are for,
Yeah.
right? Better for it to happen on a smaller project like this than like if I were to try
And
to
then
do
the
some
reality of
huge
that is that
project.
if that does bite you, maybe next time you just be like, listen, if that is, you have to live in these countries where the shipping is not going
Right,
to be
right.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Or I like ask for some discounted contribution to shipping. I don't know. These are all things
Yeah.
in the future. The project has to fund
They're
first.
yeah,
Like
they're bridges that you will burn after you cross them.
exactly. I will burn them before, during, and after I cross them,
Yeah, dude.
honestly.
So I know you were at work today. Did you have a lot of time to look at any other Zine Quest stuff today?
I have looked at a few things. The sort of the main thing I've had like a real opportunity to look at, and I'm sort of shouting this out everywhere I can because I talked to the creator, and we sort of like exchanged our sort of preview stuff, is the Stoneflesh gift, which is also
I
on
they were in this
Crowdfundr.
stream today. They were they were in this stream and I talked about their thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so funny. I did an interview with Talk of the Table like 2 days ago and did the same thing. I was like, love Stoneflesh Gift. It's so cool. And they were same deal. They were like,
Yeah.
oh, we just did an interview with him. I'm like, well, happy to give him his flowers. Like it's a super cool thing.
Yeah, it
I
looks
love
rad.
body horror. I'm a big fan of sci-fi. Two great tastes that taste great together. Like
I
it's
have
great.
been out of the mothership game for a while because it's like nothing
Hmm.
against the system or anyone making stuff for it, but I'm waiting on my box.
Oh, right,
You know what I
of
mean?
course.
So like for the last year I've been like I'm not even going to look at another mothership product until I have my
Right.
box in my house. But they're supposed to be shipping that very soon. I think they locked orders very recently. So that might
Hmm.
be the first thing that I'm like putting in for and just being like, yeah, give me it. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. I think and it also has one of the like it not to say that not to say that the adventure hooks any of the adventure hooks are not good. Like the adventure hooks are good, but also has I think
Mhm.
maybe my favorite adventure hook in terms of like you know, because as with so many other things, people all, you know, like same thing with like other sort of like dungeon crawlers or whatever, you know, people are like, why are you going into this dungeon? It's so deadly. There's so many traps there. There's all these monsters. Like, why are you going in there? Like, what's the point? The same could be asked of the Stoneflesh gift. Why are you going into this creepy living spaceship? But one of the adventure hooks, it's called the little title is the Stoneflesh Angel, and it's just that the ship touches down somewhere where the player characters are stranded, so they don't really got a choice.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we're stranded on this barren planetoid, and this weird flesh ship just touched down. Well, guess we'll get on and figure out how to pilot it
Yeah.
because that's preferable to being on here. You know, I'm like that makes so much. It's like the framing of it that way makes so much sense, and not to say that the other ones don't, which are like you're in a bad economic situation, someone paid you to salvage it, right? Makes total sense. But like, there's something about the idea of like the desperation plus the body horror of the ship itself of like we have to get off here and we're going out of the frying pan into the fire, but at least the fire is somewhere else.
Right.
Like
Cool. Well, this looks great. And I hope it funds. I hope it does really well for you.
yeah, thank you.
Um so what do you want to do? You want to hang out and look at some more stuff or you got somewhere to be or what?
I think I think I've got
It's
to
up to you.
figure out I think I've got to figure out dinner and my
I
plans are
feel
for
you.
this evening. So
I'm lucky enough that
so
my
yeah.
wife is handling that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But cool. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'll check back in on this on one of my other streams later, and I'll keep promoting it.
Of course, yeah, and I'm thinking I'm not 100% sure, but I might even try to because I have 2 stretch goals for the campaign, and I might try to release some like either previews or maybe even again the same sort of early access text to one of those, depending on how things go. So maybe there'll be more stuff to look at.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll let you go. Let you figure out your future.
Thanks, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. And anytime you got something new coming out, hit me up, and I'll be glad to have you on and talk to you.
Great, thanks. That's great to know.
All right, stay gold. Okay. Cool. That was fun. That was cool. Let me reactivate my webcam. There we go. I'm back. So, that was the Hauntings of Hyde Park. I